Hi everyone. Welcome to the opening year of the First Act Film Festival.
One of the things that speaks volumes from this is, you know, all these films are just stories, and that's something that might sound silly, but people sometimes forget that when you're making films, you're just telling stories, and you know you want to tell stories to as wide an audience as possible, and you know one thing that we seem to be pushing out, or some people think that we do, is the sort of the miserableism. Scotland does miserableism, you know, really well. But you know, we don't always do miserableism, and we can do anything we want. You know, like these films here, they can prove you can do whatever you want. If you want to be, you know, you want to make sci-fi movies, go and make sci-fi movies. If you want to go and make horror movies, go and make horror movies. If you want to make comedies, go and, no, don't do comedies because that's what I'm doing. Take my market. From the brief introduction, when I started out in cinematography, and after a few years, I decided that I wanted to go and make my first short film. So I made a little romantic comedy, and my fiancée will tell you I'm the most unromantic person you'll ever meet in your life. She was raging, absolutely raging, when she seen my short film. But what it was, you know, it was just a story I wanted to tell. You know, it was just a nice wee short film, and it seemed to translate and, you know, do really well, quite well over in the States and in Europe. And there's something, see, when you go out to these places, they love the Scottish. They absolutely adore us. They want to bring you into their parties, and they want to take you and introduce you to their mas. Like, I had a guy, you know, he's like, you're Scottish, come. I want you to make a video for my daughter. Well, speak to my daughter. And I was like, all right, people were marrying me off to their daughters in America now. We can go anywhere we want, and we can do whatever we want, and you can tell whatever stories you want. There shouldn't be any limitation on what kind of stories you want to tell, and don't let anybody tell you can't. You know, and one thing when you do go out, and try and make as, you know, wide a range of films as you can. Try and find your voice. That's something that, you know, people forget, is, you know, stories that you can tell. You know, every single person here will be able to tell a different story to somebody else and tell it better than somebody else. It's just how we are. We're all different.
And kind of talk about sort of what I think are really great elements that can help create a really great film, based on my experience working with Young Filmmakers Glasgow, and a lot of experience that I've had in working with stage as well that I feel applies, as well as a few other films. When I made the film with Young Filmmakers Glasgow, I felt very comfortable on set, I would say. I had to play a very vulnerable role, a woman giving birth. So I YouTubed women giving birth the night before, and I wished I hadn't done that a little bit, because it's just so personal. But then when we got into it, I really was so glad, because I was able to do this scream that I felt was really, I sort of got into something about that it was real. And I think I surprised some of the crew a little bit. I tried to warn them, they didn't really believe me. Yeah, and then I would say some of the things that were really helpful to me, there was a small crew. Everyone there was in line with the vision of what was happening, and they were wanting to make a great film and bring about this story. And I was really struck by how each young person was skilled and passionate, how passionate and skilled they were, and how committed they were to learning the art of the craft excellently. And I feel like that's something that's very, that's shared amongst this group of people. And it's going to be a real asset to all of us in this nation and this world.
The big movies will come to the UK and will tend to be centred in the southeast, simply because the infrastructure is there, and high-end movies, big movies, can't be made anywhere else outside of the Greater London area. They will come to Scotland, World War Z closed down the middle of the city. They will come on vacation for 2 or 3 weeks, but they can never do any more than that because there's no sustainable infrastructure that they can actually use in order to make their movies. When it comes to high-end TV, as we're seeing with Outlander, and as we might have seen one time with Game of Thrones, which did want to come to Scotland, but couldn't make it work because there was no shooting space, and they got captured by Northern Ireland, who've been enjoying something in the order of 45 to 50 million pounds of revenue coming into Northern Ireland per year, which should have and could have been in Scotland. So the argument I've been making to Scottish Government, and for what it's worth to Creative Scotland, is very much an economic argument rather than a cultural argument. And I think that the significance of a film studio, what it means is the beginnings of the possibility of having an industrial system and a commercial system within which all of your talents and all of your energies can work. Because at the moment, it can't work. You will bounce off that glass ceiling that's created by the lack of ambition that exists within Scottish Government, and particularly Creative Scotland. Until we can change that, we will constantly be doing what I had to do, which was to leave. Where you get to a point in your life where you discover that you will die if you stay. And so I've left and I keep coming back. I've always had a home here. I managed to keep my place. And I come back and I can only stay a few days before I get back down south or off to America. So the question is, how can you, in addressing this futurology question, how can you work to improve matters so that you can actually thrive and stay? I think the first thing is that the film studio is essential. I think we've got Ward Park out in Cumbernauld, which has sort of grown up organically, and is doing a great job, and it's doing a great job in illustrating to Scottish Government that we're talking about something real here, and it does mean real employment, real money. But I think we need at least 2 more of them in order to garner the potential that television, and particularly I have to say American TV, can bring. Now what's the advantage of that? As John said, he's unlikely to be shooting in a studio like that, but the fact of the matter is that it's a gradual process of bringing up your skills level, bringing up your infrastructure, creating a system where people can actually feed their kids, send them to school, and have a bit of dignity and be something, you know, instead of the scumbling around struggling to be a filmmaker and just sitting in some lonely garret there being magnificently principled. So ultimately, I think how do we build a film studio? I think we build our film studio by making the political arguments at the top and creating a definable political will. Does Scotland need a voice? Is that voice universal? Will that voice travel across the world? Now, Bill Forsyth, who's an old chum of mine, we made loads